So I finally saw Spider-Man Far From Home, and here are my thoughts. Usually I fully summarize the plot, but I'm not going to do that for this review because there are some things that I want to talk about regarding this movie and the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and more so this character. Nonetheless, there will still be spoilers, so be sure to turn this video off if you care about any of that. Most things considered, the movie itself is pretty good, and I think that most individuals are going to enjoy it. Nice little popcorn flick, great on the action and so forth. But that's pretty generic, and everybody is probably going to say the same exact thing. I just want to get that out of the way. Now let's talk about what I was impressed with. I was very, very impressed with how Mysterio was handled. I was a little bit skeptical as to how this would play out. Anybody that knew anything about the comics knew that Mysterio was going to end up being a villain. So even with the promos trying to portray him as this good guy, I knew that there would be some sort of spin on that later or further explanation. But even knowing that, of course, that was going to be revealed, it still has some elements that catches you off guard. For example, Tony Stark leaves Peter Parker some little high-tech glasses that can do everything from like summoning drones and all sorts of stuff. And Parker thinks that the note that he left for him, Tony Stark that is, means that he needs to choose someone more worthy of those glasses. He, of course, chooses Mysterio as they chat at some bar. Remind you that he is an illusionist. The trickery is his thing. And that's when we realize his true motives. The bar that they were in after they defeated this elemental was even a hologram itself. And this plan to get the glasses was a plan that was really in the making. Behind all of this and supporting Mysterio is a team of former Tony Stark employees and affiliates. Tony Stark took Mysterio's ideas, these hologram ideas, that seemingly screwed him over, changed the name, all sorts of things. And it seems that Mysterio is in it for the notoriety. So as a recap, they've been fighting all these elements, and it was all done with drones. Now this doesn't hit the fan until tokenized MJ actually grabbed one of the projectors from a drone, and then it's revealed to Spider-Man that Beck have been playing them this whole time. As far as to how this relates to the comics, him trying to do this for the fame, it's sort of part of him, but the Iron Man part is something that's new for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as that never was really part of his original like origin story, if you will. Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, had Hollywood aspirations that ended up with him being a villain. Now that change is tolerable because, believe it or not, Mysterio is one of the better handled like one-off villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and to be honest, his illusionary expertise makes for a great clash on screen. If I can be completely honest, everything positive that really happens with Spider-Man is centered around him combating Beck. There are some really cool scenes with illusionary tech that places Spider-Man in various places, fighting random things that aren't actually there. Overall, this villain is handled excellently. And I have to admit that even though I was skeptical, by the way, this would mean that Beck was full of crap when he talked about the whole multiverse thing. So I hate to burst your bubble on that. So all around, it's an enjoyable film. So if you're just looking for a quick basic popcorn flick, even with the family, you will enjoy it. The post-credit scene reveals that Fury in the movie was a Skrull the entire time, and the real one was just chilling. The idea of Fury, though, working with those Skrulls is something that's very odd to me, especially in the context of this universe and just Skrulls in general. The mid-credit scene was the most revealing. It seems that they are going to, go in that direction of the public not being so fond of Spider-Man. As before Beck died, he made it appear as if Spider-Man did all of this, and he also told everybody that Spider-Man's Peter Parker. The coolest thing is that J.K. Simmons pops up back as Triple J, so things are about to get dicey. Now that the basics are out the way, and you know now that you can get something out of it, there's a lot that I do dislike that has less to do with the movie itself and more to do with how they handle the characters. I've maintained a more nonchalant position on Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man, but for whatever reason, this film amplified everything, and I'm not really fond of it. He's Spider-Man with his, corny one-liners during battle, and of course how he acts when using his powers. That is Spider-Man. All that is fine, but this isn't Peter Parker when you consider everything else. The whole clinging to Iron Man thing, I just couldn't get used to. I tried to, believe me, this fool looks up to Iron Man, and even in death, he's still clinging to him. It's almost like he has no sort of agency, no individuality. To take a character as prominent as this, to limit him to Tony Stark's stepchild is really criminal. So the more Spider-Man is Peter Parker, the more issues that I had with it, and I kept circling back to even events that happened in previous films within the universe. And I'm like, okay, this isn't right. This was never right. Yes, tokenized MJ and tokenized Flash is just that, and Aunt May being so young with this sex appeal is weird as all hell. So adding to that though, Peter Parker and his being, right? It seems like Uncle Ben was there to replace Tony Stark, and that's just not a good idea if we consider how impactful this character is. The idea of Iron Man sort of knighting Spider-Man is just stupid, and the idea of Spider-Man being basically created by Iron Man in a sense is the joke that just went too far. As I mentioned earlier, if you look at that minus reading the comics or having connection to the source material, just being a normie, this movie is fine. Normies will have zero problem with it, and they probably think the whole father and son relationship with Iron Man and Spider-Man is perfectly fine. They may prefer it that way, but to me it's just weird. I understand that when you have a universe, you have to make these characters bounce off of one another, interact with one another. This is something that I actually appreciate, right? That continuity. But what has happened to Peter and Monica Rambeau is just weird because they've taken arguably lesser figures and had them look up to them. So their characters are sacrificed for the sake of boosting up the other, and I don't feel that that's necessary. Because Monica isn't as popular as Peter Parker, it makes sense why people would shrug that off like in the Captain Marvel movie. But this, you know, Tony Stark acting as his father figure to Spider-Man is just totally unnecessary. I would have rather them just had Uncle Ben get killed on screen and having him influence him instead of whatever the hell is going on now. The longer this narrative carries on, the more odd it gets. So that's where I'm at with this movie and the Marvel Cinematic Universe of Spider-Man after seeing him appear in a few films. The other positive thing is that there's nothing that alluded to Spider-Gwen existing or everybody's favorite tokenized character Miles Morales. There's not really any SJW sort of narrative, though. I find it quite the double standard when the grown chick was telling Peter to get undressed in front of her. He's 16, reminds you. Imagine if that were like on the other foot and let's say Happy told MJ to get undressed in front of him. And imagine the crazy amount of backlash that would get. So far, I haven't seen one damn video on that scene, and I was like, this is kind of weird. Anyway, what are your thoughts on the movie and the future of Spider-Man within the Marvel Cinematic Universe?